Hi friends, brothers and sisters, peace. Today more sharing with you on the parable of the rich fool. There's no doubt that money is the most common and prevalent idol in the history of mankind. Now if a person wants to know whether money is his idol, he can simply examine himself in this way. What person or thing does he spend the most time and energy of his life on? Now that thing or person is his idol. Many people have spent their lives trying to get rich. They think they are masters of money. But man's desire for money is never satisfied. So they are really servants of money. They are slaves to money. And they have to pursue it and serve it all their lives. They ignore Jesus' warning that man could not serve both God and wealth. The rich man's wealth gives him a sense of security. Money can buy a lot of things to meet his countless material needs. Rich people tend to believe in their own resources and abilities, and they are the most difficult ones to learn to rely on God. Because they seem to be succeeding on their own, they are prone to having the illusion that they don't need God. The rich man is ignorant because he is self-sufficient, full of pride, mistakenly believing that he is the master of his life, that everything is in his own hands, and so he has never sought God or known God all his life. The book of 1 Timothy 6:17 teaches us, "Teach those who are rich in this world not to be proud, and not to trust in their money, which is so unreliable." The rich man was a fool because he failed to acknowledge God's ownership of his riches. He confused stewardship with ownership. Now, instead of thanking God for his blessing, he left God out of his life. His prosperity was not due to his efforts, but a result of the productivity of his land. And yet he did not acknowledge his source. He was ungrateful to the giver of his riches. He talked only to himself, about himself, and his monologue was full of first-person words of myself, and I. It has 14 references to himself, I, myself, and so on. He was taking care of number one. He was utterly selfish and self-absorbed. He had fatally failed to consult his Creator and Master in the making of his life plan. The rich man was also a fool because he confused ownership with stewardship. God entrusted him with abundant riches to help those in need. He could have the blessing of being God's good steward. But all he thought about was his own pleasure. He amassed wealth only for his own benefit, without doing any good works, ignoring the hardships of his neighbors. He had no sense of responsibility to God and man, and that in God's moral order was foolishness. The book of 1 Peter 4:10 says, "God has given each of you a gift from his great variety of spiritual gifts. Use them well to serve one another." He was a fool also because he missed the meaning of life. Life is not about possessions or worldly pleasures, but about God. His riches had blinded his vision and corrupted his heart. God is the creator of the universe, and the author of life, and the fountain of love and all goodness. He is the most important, most predominant reality in our lives. We cannot have any meaning of life without or apart from him. God created us for eternal communion and fellowship with him. And so the true meaning of life can only be found in God. We were made for fellowship with God and his Son, Jesus Christ. The rich man was a fool also because he did not seek for God. He was so engrossed with the riches of this world that he had no time for God. Because he had no time for God in this life, God would also have no time for him in the next life. Because he abandoned God, God will also abandon him. He would tragically spend eternity without God. The book of 2 Chronicles 15:12 says, "Whenever you seek him, you will find him. But if you abandon him, he will abandon you." Someone has commented, "The one who is so diligent in his quest to preserve his wealth is no fool according to human wisdom. He is more likely to be regarded as far-sighted and shrewd, able to see the big picture, and making daring business decisions. But such a person deludes himself into thinking that he is the master of his fate and that he can make himself invulnerable to the vicissitudes of this mortal life. He puts his trust in what he possesses rather than in God. As a result, he has plenty to live on, but nothing to live for. He spent the whole of his life thinking through his business investments and enjoying earthly delights. He has no room for God in this life and no hope of eternity. The worst thing in life is to die without God and without hope." The book of Job 8:13 says, "The hopes of the godless evaporate. Their confidence hangs by a thread. They are leaning on a spider's web." Our life is on loan from God, and God may call in the loan at any time. The rich fool had just made a long-term plan for his life, but it turned out that he had only a few hours to live. He thought that life and soul were his own, and he did not know that all this was God-given. He thought he could enjoy his riches, but he would have to leave all of them behind. He never gave a thought about God in his life, but he would still have to face his judgment after death. Now Jesus called such a person a fool. The rich man was a fool because he did not believe in God and did not care whether God existed. And in the end, he lived a life without God at all. There are many people in the world like him. There are people who are atheists, who believe in atheism and live out their beliefs. There are some who are practical atheists. They may or may not believe in the existence of God, but they live out a godless life anyway. And then there are people who are called agnostics, who don't know if God existed, and who don't care if God existed, and they also live out godless lives. From God's point of view, all these people are fools. The Bible says in Psalm 14:1, "Only fools say in their hearts, there is no God." Now Psalm 14 has been called the atheist psalm. Someone has commented, "God calls atheists fools." In this psalm, atheism can be traced to the human soul. The psalm reveals that atheism is not an intellectual problem, but a moral problem. It is not that man cannot believe in God, but that he will not believe in God. He enjoyed sin, immersed himself in sin, justified sin, preferring sin to knowledge of God. God's presence poses a threat to him, so he must exclude him from the universe. This psalm is so important that it's repeated in Psalm 53. Psalm 53:1 says the same thing as Psalm 14:1. "Only fools say in their hearts, there is no God." Well, that's my sharing today, friends. I'll have more sharing with you next time. Bye-bye.